Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Inshallah, we'll get started in just a second. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, so I hope everyone is able to see my screen, inshallah. And I can see you all chatting. I can't hear you, so just feel free to put things in the chat box. Okay, so we will get started. Inshallah, Jazakallah khair for the introduction and the opening dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربنا زدنا علما. Okay, so today's topic, inshallah, is around the idea of anxiety and the role of perfectionism and how that can relate to anxiety, burnout, and then what can we do as Muslims, as professionals, as students, as parents to help us cope with some of this anxiety. And I'll be bringing in some of my research around coping and what I did during my PhD years, as well as a lens of Islamic psychology. Okay, so the first slide here, just to start off on a slightly light note. So perhaps this may remind you of yourself or someone else. Just when we are trying to adult, as they say, or adulting, I know people don't always like that term. Sometimes we can be a little bit perfectionistic. We might end up criticizing ourselves. We might be anxious or stressed out. And you can see in this cartoon, my son was looking at me working on my slides this morning, and he was laughing at this alien cartoon, as he calls it, that you perhaps need to go for shopping, you need to cook food, you need to work out, you need to take care of yourself and others. And then, of course, you have to make sure the existential dread does not set in of like, am I even doing enough or what am I doing? Alhamdulillah, for us as Muslims, I think we have a much better understanding of this. So hopefully we are not in an existential dread situation every day. And then of course we need to do laundry and vacuum and like pay the bills. So it's an interesting mix of like the complexity of the human condition. And then there's always laundry to do. So just wanted to sort of start off on that lighter note. And with that, just to take maybe 10 or so seconds to try and just check within ourselves our internal battery. So, what are you currently feeling? How are you currently feeling? If you want to put in the chat box, feel free, but just more of an exercise for ourselves. So, have a look at this battery and see, are you feeling great? Are you feeling just meh, just okay? Are you struggling? And then, if you are, then maybe trying to use this time to focus on one thing that you could improve for today, inshallah. Then hopefully no one is running completely empty. But if you are, definitely take care of yourself today if you are able to do so, or take this time during this presentation to practice a little bit of self-care. Okay, so we'll move on, inshallah. We have about 55 minutes or so together. I do want to leave some time at the end for questions. So we're going to try and get through 5 learning objectives. So the first one that we have here is understanding the cognitive, emotional, and physical aspects of perfectionism and how it can lead to anxiety and burnout. The second thing we'll talk about is this idea of the gap and how it leads to self-criticism. Third, we're going to talk about our personalities and look a little bit into our childhoods and see if we can figure out where some of these anxieties can come from. Then finally, we will end off on a more positive note. I will share with you some just everyday self help, self compassion strategies, and then also some evidence based and Islamically integrated strategies to reduce this idea of perfectionism and anxiety. So, to start off with some definitions, I usually always start off with definitions, even when I'm lecturing at university, for example, just to ensure that we are all on the same page. So, perfectionism, as is defined in some studies, and again, the definition differs, can be seen as a catalyst, something that moves forward anxiety and burnout. And we see from the research that individuals with high personal standards but low self compassion or even low self worth or self esteem can experience greater stress and also more mental fatigue because you're always thinking and you always have this cognitive load that I'm not good enough. I should have done better, or this should have been done better by other people. And then that leads to overthinking and rumination. So, rumination is essentially this psychological concept. It's very sort of common in individuals who are suffering from anxiety disorders and even depression, but it can come up for just our everyday behaviors as well. When your thinking amplifies your perception of failure and that you are not good enough. And I've put perception or perceived in italics there because that is the key word here. Perhaps other people are telling you that, oh, sister, you did such a great job, or brother, you're doing such a good job. But in your head, your perception of yourself is that, no, I am not good enough. And a chronic rumination, unfortunately, has been linked to lots of mental as well as physical adverse outcomes. So it includes things like insomnia, so you're waking up at night or not being able to sleep at night, and also a loss of attention and focus when you are trying to get your work done. And rumination, again, some just giving like a small example here. Maybe something happened at work, a colleague or coworker said something, you didn't like it, and then you're thinking about it all day, all week, and it's actually affecting your attention, your behavior, your sleep, your eating patterns. Or it could be a family based example. We all sometimes I know experience family drama. So and alhamdulillah, like we live in collectivistic cultures, which is great. But because of that, there's lots of different personalities that we are dealing with. And maybe someone says something, your parent says something, your mother-in-law says something, your brother says something, and you perhaps did not like the way they said it or what they said. And then you are constantly ruminating and overthinking about what they said and your response to it. So I hope that makes sense, the differences between perfectionism and then rumination. And before we move forward, also just to differentiate between stress and anxiety. These terms I think get thrown around quite a bit, especially in pop psychology and self-help literature. So I just want to differentiate the two. So stress, think of it more as an external cause. So it's your natural response to a challenge. It can actually be a good thing. And research shows that a little bit of stress is good. It's good for us. If we have an exam, we're hosting like a big gathering, for example, it's good to get a little bit stressed, and that can lead to positive outcomes. It's a milder response, and you can manage it. Whereas anxiety is more of an internal origin. This is where it's all about your thoughts. Nothing is happening in the physical world, but internally, perhaps you're thinking about a test that you have maybe next week. And all of a sudden, you have this really strong physical response where you feel a sense of pounding heart, maybe you're feeling dizzy, maybe your stomach has like butterflies in it. So it's the symptoms of stress, but a lot stronger. And anxiety, especially chronic anxiety, is something that we want to be careful of. So, with regards to what all of this leads to, so does perhaps you might think, okay, like, what's the big deal if I hold myself to a really high standard or I hold other people to a really high standard? Like, it's not a bad thing, right? It's excellence. And as Muslims, we should strive for excellence. So, and we will talk about ihsan a little bit later, but I do want to differentiate between perfectionism and excellence. Perfectionism is very much outcome based, it's very much results focused, whereas ihsan, the concept of excellence and doing the best that you can in the sight of Allah, is a lot more effort based. So you just put in the work, you try your best. It's more of a work ethic, whereas perfectionism is more of an outcomes based response. So it can have behavioral consequences as well as emotional consequences. In terms of behavior, we see that people who tend to be high in perfectionistic tendencies and therefore a lot more anxious, they tend to start fearing making mistakes. They tend to avoid behavior and engage in avoidance of certain behaviors. And they often interpret minor setbacks as personal failures. So just something goes wrong at work, something goes wrong with like the family or with the kids, and you take like the entire cognitive load and emotional load on yourself. The second consequence, of course, is emotional. And we see that individuals who experience a lot of anxiety is also correlated within the research as well as clinical practice with self criticism and negative self evaluation. Okay, so here's a nice sort of diagram or image that links all of the concepts that we've talked about so far. And this is from a research study as well. So it's the interplay of perfectionism, rumination, or overthinking, how it leads to anxiety, and then ultimately how it can lead to burnout. Okay, so I like to use case studies. I know it's not super interactive this session, but you can just try and think about it yourself. And sometimes a case study really helps us to see how all of these research constructs and clinical concepts apply to real life people. So I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I did do a little bit of therapy in my training. I've then switched to research, but I would have patients or clients such as Yusuf, for example. The names, ages, everything has been changed, of course. So you can imagine a person, a male, for example, in his late 20s. Perhaps he's newly married, he's working at a new job as well. He may feel pressure to succeed, and he might be like the sole earner, perhaps, of the family. And because of his perfectionistic tendencies, he ends up working a lot longer than his colleagues. He always ends up overanalyzing the work that he's doing. For example, he's running some code and he's overanalyzing that. And he's not submitting things on time because they're not perfect. And therefore, he's getting late on his deadlines as well. So, perfectionism, the example over here would be, what if my boss or supervisor finds an error? The overthinking would be checking and rechecking your emails, for example, late at night. And then all of that, of course, leads to burnout, which can lead to being irritable, withdrawing from family and friends, and then even procrastination. So just an everyday practical example. And again, I think many of us may have experienced this at some point or another. And I think many of us may suffer from perfectionistic tendencies and how it can relate to anxiety. So just think of examples for yourself. It could be work related, school related, family related, spirituality related. So whatever makes sense for you, try and apply these terms to your own life and situation. One more example here. So we have someone named Samira. She's in her early 40s. She's a mom and she's also working as a teacher. And she's trying to juggle her career, parenting, and she's also a caregiver of an elderly mother. And her cognitive sort of perfectionistic tendencies is that she wants to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect daughter. So as you can see how this could impact her in terms of her behavior, in terms of her overthinking, and also leading to burnout. So she might be perhaps more irritable with her children or her spouse. She might have put these extreme sort of expectations on herself that her children need to have all of their schoolwork done. The house must always be spotless. All the meals need to be made from scratch and they all need to be super healthy. Again, sometimes these expectations, maybe no one else is putting it on us, but we have put it on ourselves. And that can then lead to anxiety and burnout. And for Samira, for example, the anxiety could be a physical manifestation. So, for example, getting chest pains, feeling fatigued, feeling numb, then you end up withdrawing as you start burning out. Okay, so I hope this case studies made sense so far, inshallah. And again, I'm just going to have a look at the chat to see if anyone is asking any questions or saying anything. And again, if there are any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to put in the chat box. I will try and engage with you the best I can, inshallah. Okay, so we're going to move on to sort of the unintentional external consequences as well. So sometimes what we see is that, again, we might think, what's the big deal? If I am again putting a high standard on myself, and if I want things done a certain way, um, can this have adverse consequences on other people around us? And unfortunately, it does. And this is where a lot of people come in for therapy, not for themselves, but for somebody in their life who unfortunately is so high on these tendencies of perfectionism. And because they are so anxious, it kind of ruins the whole household or the whole workplace. The research shows that being someone with these traits can actually cause hypervigilance of people around you. People feel like they're walking on eggshells. People might feel that that they are not good enough. They might feel negative around you. They might feel micromanaged, overwhelmed, exhausted, or even just underappreciated. And you can imagine for yourself as well that if you can think of maybe perhaps a supervisor or a parent that you've had or a family member who is perhaps wants things done a certain way and they are anxious, how does that make you feel when you are interacting or working with them? Okay, so we're going to move on to our second learning objective, inshallah, if there's no questions and if everything made sense. Okay, I think I'm here seeing something come up here. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, now I can see everyone's comments. I was scrolling down. I should have scrolled up. Okay, that was a technical error on my part. Someone is asking, how can one protect themselves from nostalgic anxiety and worries about the future, especially when thoughts rush through the mind and everything feels overwhelming? How can we balance it all? It's an excellent question, and it's a really common sort of situation that comes up in therapy as well. We will talk about this exact thing in maybe 10 slides or so, inshallah. So if you can wait until then, I have some strategies for this. And I'm glad the case studies were relatable, alhamdulillah. Okay, so the first barrier to sort of anxiety and perfectionism is this idea called the gap. And this is actually coming from the more, not creative research, but research around creativity. And I was doing a workshop earlier on creativity, and I realized how sort of common this skill set is and how commonly it shows up for individuals who are experiencing anxiety. So the gap, essentially, you can see from this diagram here, is what our tastes, or you can even change taste to expectations, are about something. And doesn't have to be a creative skill, but let's just take creativity, for example. So, for example, cooking or baking or any sort of thing that maybe you are building, even work, for example, can come under creativity because you are trying to create new knowledge, for example, you're trying to produce some output. So what is your expectation? That is the curve on the graph. And then the dotted line indicates, or the dotted curve rather, indicates your skill level. So what you are actually able to produce. And the gap that we see in your expectations versus your reality, that is where anxiety sits. And that is where perfectionism comes from as well. So until your skills don't match your expectations, until your reality doesn't match expectations, you will constantly feel anxious. You will constantly feel not good enough. So one way of sort of reducing this is to actually just be okay with the gap. And how can you be okay with the gap? Perhaps that top curve where it says taste, you can reduce that so you can reduce your expectations. You can also change the way you look at things. So your realism and your reality, maybe you can't change your reality, but you can change the perception of your reality as well. So I would say when I was seeing clients, the number one sort of complaint was always boil down to expectation versus reality. We are expecting something from our spouse. We are expecting something from our kids or from school or from how we did on an exam or how we want like a certain dish that we're cooking or how we want our houses and our homes to look like, how we want our connection with Allah to be. So we have these really high expectations and then we fall short and then we end up in this cycle of anxiety. The second sort of criticism that comes with when we talk about anxiety and perfectionism is this idea of self-criticism and negative talk. And you can see this a diagram over here that perhaps at one point you do feel happy about yourself. You're like, okay, my art skills have improved, or my cooking skills have improved, or my coding skills have improved. And then all of a sudden you're like, nope, this is not good enough. And then you realize that you're actually not that good. So we're constantly fighting this internal self-talk. So, self talk is this idea of attributing negative motivations to people who are well meaning. This is the more external self talk. The internal one is that you are perceiving yourself as less equipped to handle the challenges that are coming your way. And negative self talk, unfortunately, also makes you someone who sees the more negative and critical side and the more cynical side of things in the world instead of focusing on the positive. And all of this can then lead to rumination, which we talked about earlier. And this is a nice definition of rumination as well. It's essentially a pattern of negative thinking that can just consume you. It just consumes your idle time. It can bring stress. You are constantly worrying, as someone said, nostalgic anxiety. You're worrying about something that happened in the past, and then you're also fearful of the future, and you are not able to stay in the present. So, in rumination, it doesn't offer any solutions, it just gets you anxious and fearful, and then you can't stay in the present. So, it's a very, like, I would say, an undermined sort of psychological construct, but I think a lot of us perhaps do struggle with rumination and negative self talk. The third learning objective that we will move on to is understanding our personality and also doing a little bit of a deep dive into childhood factors that may contribute to anxiety and perfectionism. Because I think a lot of us might be wondering, okay, this is all great. We understand this from the research perspective, we understand case studies. But if we want to understand ourselves, you might be wondering, where did these traits come in myself or perhaps in a family member? Okay, so this is the personality skill that I like to use. It's not perfect. Again, we're talking about perfectionism. It does have some issues around validity, and there are some like research issues, just like any personality test. But it has been empirically tested. And this is the one that we used to use in therapy and counseling as well. So the acronym is OCEAN. And if anyone knows what this acronym means, feel free to put it in the chat for any psych majors or psych students or even professionals. But I will give you the definition of OCEAN in the next slide. Okay, so the O stands for openness to experience. So this has to do with our personality, that has to do with imagination, creativity. Are you like a go with the flow kind of person? Are you more structured? The C in OCEAN is conscientiousness, not consciousness, but conscientiousness, which is a part of our personality that has to do with organization, structure, orderliness, cleanliness. The A stands for agreeableness, which is part of our personality that has to do with valuing social harmony, reducing conflict. The E is for extroversion. So extroversion and introversion comes in this part of the personality scale. So extroverts are individuals who gain energy from being with people, and introverts are people who lose energy with being with other people and they don't mind like some time on their own. And then the N is for neuroticism, which is looking at emotional stability. So from morning to night, how stable are you in your emotions? Are you all over the place? Are you generally pretty stable? Do things get you really excited or really sad? Do you cry really easily? Do you get angry really easily? So that all comes under neuroticism. So I know we can't do a full personality test on everyone today, but how would you rate yourself? So you can put it in the chat box if you like, or you can just do it on your phones or on a piece of paper. So one thing I will mention, or a couple of things I will mention in terms of how we do these personality tests, is like a whole bunch of questions, but over here I'm just giving you the traits. Number one, each of these is from 0 to 100. Okay, so it's a percentage. And I have done this on myself for my counseling class, so I know which one I am. I think for openness to experience, I'm like 64% or something like that. Conscientiousness, I'm like 95%. I probably should reduce that a little bit. So again, it's from 0 to 100. And secondly, just to be mindful that from an Islamic perspective and from a secular psychological perspective, personality traits are value and judgment free. So just because you are an extrovert or you're an introvert doesn't make you a good or bad person. That's just how you are. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these unique traits and personalities to worship Him in our unique ways and to interact with each other. Sometimes our personalities can also be tests for each other as well, but they are value free and judgment free. So you might imagine that the personality traits that are most linked to anxiety and to perfectionism are conscientiousness, openness to experience, and neuroticism. Okay, so these three are the most related from the research to anxiety and perfectionism. So, openness to experience, I think we can all understand why that might be. So, someone who is very low in their openness to experience, they like to know what's happening like every hour of the day. They are not tolerant of uncertainty. They like things super structured. So, if anything changes in their day, they get super anxious. It didn't go exactly as they had planned or as they had expected. And you might even think of someone, or you might be like that yourself. You can imagine people who take trips, for example, or they go on vacation. There are some individuals who are like, yeah, I'll just pack, like, the morning of the flight, like a couple of hours before. I don't know where my passport is. And they're looking for their passport like a few minutes before leaving for the airport. They get there just in time for boarding, and they kind of go with the flow during the trip as well. Whereas other individuals have like a full-on itinerary. This is what we're doing this day. This is the activity we're going to engage in. They've packed their suitcases like a week before. They've triple checked everything. So again, it's just two extremes. Most of us are in the middle somewhere. So 40%, 50%, 70%. But sometimes I think it's funny if you look at memes or like YouTube videos or sometimes Instagram shorts, they'll have these sort of funny cartoons talking about the extremes of these personalities. Also, someone who is super conscientious, if they really can't handle mess, they can't handle clutter. I'm going to say that as like a mom. I am that mom. Like I need things to be in their place. I'm working on it as well. But if sometimes like the toys are all out or my kids haven't cleaned up or the house is not exactly how I want it to be, I will start feeling anxious. And then the perfectionistic thoughts, the rumination, the burnout, that will come in as well. So again, all of this is for us to improve ourselves. We don't want to start judging our like husbands or wives or our in-laws or our kids with these personality traits. We want to see where we are and try and improve ourselves, inshallah. So another personality trait, this is not mentioned in the ocean scale, but this study actually was done by Yaqeen Institute. You can go on their website and look up this article as well. I apologize, the reference is not showing up here. But one of their scholars had done this article, done this research study during COVID, actually. And they interviewed and they did surveys with thousands of Muslims in the US, especially during the COVID era, about how they were managing their worry and their anxiety with all of this stuff around the healthcare scares that were happening during that time. And one sort of personality trait that came out interestingly was this idea of uncertainty intolerance. So individuals who expressed more tolerance, they were able to better manage uncertainty, because especially during COVID, things were so uncertain. I remember I was at university. It was a Thursday. I still remember it was a Thursday morning or afternoon. My mom had called me and she said, "Hey, like, Kashmala, just maybe go home because everything is going into lockdown." And it's just immediately everything went into lockdown. This was at least here in Toronto, and it might be different for other places. And then one day we're wearing masks, and then one day like the vaccines are coming out, and it was just things were changing so quickly. So the individuals who were able to be just okay with the changes instead of trying to resist them or trying to watch the news all the time or consume news or doom scrolling as they call it as well, they were the ones who felt the most worry and the most anxiety. So what we can take from this research study is that we need to sort of work on being able to be more tolerant, more accepting, more flexible of uncertainty. And especially for us as Muslims, I think it's not too difficult to understand this concept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of everything. Allah's knowledge is something that is certain. His promises are certain. So we can rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even if we feel that other people or other things are not reliable. In terms of our childhood and social factors, I'm like a big fan of like these millennial memes. If anyone else finds them funny, if you don't, that's fine. So just things that perhaps have even happened within our childhood, perhaps the ways in which we were parented. Again, we are not shaming parents. All parents deserve respect, and I think all parents, and now I'm a parent myself, are trying their best with the tools that they have. But perhaps we were told that, this is like everything is haram, for example, or perhaps we dealt with bullying or Islamophobia. Perhaps there's a lot of pressure put on academics and like, why did you get an A minus and not an A plus? So things like this can also affect sort of our sense of self-worth, perfectionism, and anxiety. We also see if in children, growing up in a hypercritical and hypersensitive household can unfortunately lead to some of these tendencies. Again, I'm not saying that you're going to if you yell at your child one day or you tell them they need to study harder, it's going to cause some anxiety disorder. But just for us, especially for those of us who are parents or soon to be parents, or even if we are not, just to reflect on our own childhoods, that how much love or validation do we give others, even in the workplace? It doesn't have to be just kids, based on results and not effort. So you want to, again, strive for excellence. You want to strive and have a growth mindset, an improvement mindset, and set realistic goals, even for children or the people that you are working with, the people that you are responsible for. And definitely reframing failure, especially for young children. Perhaps they're learning how to ride a bike. Perhaps they're learning how to swim. They're learning how to write. To focus on the fact that failure is just a chance for growth. Failure is not a bad thing. And one thing I've tried to incorporate just within my own parenting is even this idea of coloring. I know growing up, when we colored, we had to color in the lines. And this is like kindergarten. This is like when you're really young, no one's marking your coloring. You just have crayons in front of you. And we were told from a very young age, you have to color in the lines. So I looked at the research on this, and I'm not saying this is going to cause any sort of psychological disorders, but even allowing children, like young children especially, they want to be creative, let them be creative. They don't have to color in the lines. They can use whichever medium of expression that they feel most comfortable with, and finding beauty in the messiness of their art and what they are proud of, instead of restricting children, especially when we don't need to restrict them in something like coloring within the lines. So let me know what you guys think of that, inshallah. Okay, so we're coming to the last few learning objectives for our talk today, inshallah. So we'll talk about the self-compassion strategies and the techniques that we can use every day, inshallah. These are research-based and have clinical evidence in terms of coping and what we can do to help ourselves. So number one is the coping literature gives us a few different coping styles. Some of my PhD work was on this. I looked at how Muslim Syrian newcomers, when Syrian refugees were coming and resettling into Toronto, I basically asked them, how are you coping with financial distress, with resettlement, with coming into a new culture? And these are the different coping styles that they talk to me about. And this is in the literature as well. So, number one is positive, and you can see how you cope. So, when you are feeling anxious, when you are feeling burnt out, how do you normally cope? So, positive coping strategies, for example, would be journaling, if you have the access, being able to go for therapy, peer support, just talking to a good friend, maybe even taking a nap, for example, as long as you're not like using it as an avoidance technique and you just need the rest. I personally love naps, so I highly recommend them. Having a healthy meal or a balanced meal, even treating yourself, sometimes this can be a positive form of coping. Negative or maladaptive coping, I would say, is like binge watching a show, for example. Again, not hating on like watching shows, but using entertainment to forget your problems. Of course, like we all need some sort of like distraction, entertainment, a form of relaxation from time to time, but using it to get away from the things that are actually bothering you, and then you're missing your prayers, for example, you're not sleeping on time, then that can become negative or maladaptive coping. Same thing with eating junk food. Again, like a treat from time to time is fine, but engaging in a lot of unhealthy eating as a way to mask emotions. Some people call it emotional eating. There is research on that as well. Withdrawing, just getting numb, not engaging with your family members, all of this would be negative or maladaptive coping. And then finally, especially for us as Muslims, we have faith-based coping, but this is actually even in for Christianity, for Judaism, Hinduism, for all of the religions, the link between faith and coping is actually so strong in the literature that it's an excellent tool to be able to use spirituality, prayer. Other traditions will use things like mindfulness and meditation and yoga to be able to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have the tools, alhamdulillah, built within our deen to use faith to be able to manage our emotions and help us regulate ourselves. One quick nuanced point about faith based coping is that we do have to be careful that we are not using our deen or religious practices or rituals as a maladaptive coping. And you might be wondering, how is that possible? Like, how can you use faith in the wrong way? So unfortunately, we do see things like spiritual abuse, for example, or sometimes you will see, especially men or our brothers going to the masjid or going to the mosque just to not deal with family problems. And they will kind of just hang out at the mosque, and I'll just go have dinner there, and I'll just go hang out and just have chai or coffee after Isha, and I'm just like not going to come back home. So things like that, for example, or also engaging in such like long prayers that you're perhaps neglecting, maybe like a young child, for example. I'm trying to think of other like this is again, my participants had mentioned some of these examples to me, and I remember some of these from therapy as well. Also forcing your religious practices on other people as well. Perhaps they engage in their prayer differently. They want to read a particular surah, but you're like forcing them to read a particular dhikr, for example. Just things like this. So just being mindful that our faith is not being weaponized as a form of maladaptive coping. Another way to challenge perfectionistic thinking is to get rid of this all or nothing mindset, that if it's not perfect, then it's not worth it. And try and have some cognitive reframing that it doesn't have to be perfect to be worthwhile, it can be just good enough. And this is the good enough standards. So for example, you have a school assignment. I know I struggled with this in undergrad years, that if I needed the assignment to just like be perfect because I want to get a good grade on it, but replacing those rigid goals that I must get 100% with more flexible goals that I will do the best that I can with the time that I have. And of course, again, we have our deen. You put in the work ethic, and then you leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You make dua for the best outcome. The second thing we can do to reduce anxiety is to stop ourselves from over checking things. So if you are someone who is an over checker, unfortunately, it can lead to more serious problems like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Within the Islamic tradition and Islamic psychology, scrupulosity which is OCD mixed with a religious ritual. So, for example, a very common one, unfortunately, within the Muslim community is rechecking and overdoing wudu or ghusl, for example. So perhaps you are struggling with it, or you may know of someone who's struggling with this, that before they pray, they end up making wudu 3, 4, 5, 10 times because they feel like this part is still dry. I didn't wash this part properly. So this can unfortunately lead to disordered thinking. So try and stop yourself from over checking things. And of course, if it's more serious like OCD, then you will need to get professional help and go for therapy. The third thing we can do is, of course, practice self compassion. And this is in regards to negative self talk or self criticism. So when we make a mistake, just think about how I would respond to a family member or a trusted friend. So usually we're not going to berate someone and say, you did a horrible job. How could you ever do this? Usually we're a bit more empathetic towards other people. So just saying something like, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. Everyone struggles sometimes. I know it's hard for us to say that to ourselves sometimes, but to try and reframe the way we talk. And yes, the word for OCD that's kind of from a religious angle, it's an interesting word. It's called scrupulosity. And I'm not sure if I can type things in the chat myself. Not seeing if I can type it, but yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not able to type it. But if you just Google or search up scrupulosity, you'll see Khalil Center has quite a few publications on this, and there's a lot of Islamic psychology research around this topic as well. The fifth thing we can do is using mindful grounding techniques. I've actually taught this to my children as well. I will try and do this whenever I can remember. This is a 5-4-3-2-1 method. It's actually great for depressive thoughts. It's great for panic attacks. It's great for anxiety. And it can really help slow down our minds as well. So as soon as you start feeling rumination coming along, you're spiraling, you're getting worried about the future or regretting the past, what I want you to do is 5-4-3-2-1. You're going to stop, take a deep breath, and then you're going to look wherever you are, whichever space you are in, at home, at work, outside, in nature. You're going to try and look for 5 things. So just look around and count 5 things you can see. Then you're going to find 4 things that you can physically touch. If there's nothing around you, it could just be on your own self, like your clothes, for example, your hijab, or like your hand, for example. Then you're going to take a pause and listen for 3 things. Take a pause and try and smell 2 things in your environment. And then again, pause and try and taste 1 thing within your environment. And if you have nothing to eat or drink, for example, it's just a taste within your mouth, just even that sensation. So what this does, it just has like an interesting mind-body sort of regulation where it just helps you stop some of this spiraling and rumination. And it helps you get back into the present and not focus on the past or the future. And again, all of these things that I'm sharing are just for everyday examples. Again, if you are someone that you know has more of a severe anxiety condition, these things might not help as much. You would need to go for professional help. The second last thing that I want to discuss is scheduling worry time. I actually love this because this is something new to me. This was a new technique that I'm going to start trying from today, inshallah, is because some of us, many of us will worry at different parts of our life with different situations. So we're going to worry anyway. So instead of stopping the worry, why don't we set like a little timeline for worry? So instead of worrying all day, take out 10 minutes and just worry in those 10 minutes. Maybe take out a journal, maybe make dua at that time, read 2 rakahs, do something, get all your worries out, label them, accept them, and then move on. So instead of carrying the worries around all day, do it for a short time. So I'm actually going to try this myself today, inshallah, and see if it works. And the last couple of things is, of course, seeking feedback, because when we have perfectionistic tendencies, we get really scared of seeking feedback. We think people are criticizing us. So just be really mindful, intentional, and ask people, hey, can I get some constructive feedback? Not criticism, but constructive feedback. So before you overwork on something and you've planned out everything, take a pause and ask for constructive feedback. Be okay with collaboration and really trying to work on the mindset I think that many of us have, or perhaps we grew up with, that if it's not, no one can do it properly. If it's not done well, I'll just have to do it. Only I can do it properly. This is not a correct way of viewing our abilities. So being okay with other people also helping. The final couple of things is to celebrate effort, not just outcome. We talked about this at the beginning of the presentation, that just reflect on what went well, not just on what went right. Gratitude journaling is excellent for this as well. And finally, using a physical response to manage the emotional response. So if none of this is working, just get up and go for a walk. The research is really increasing on just the importance of walking. I know like we've heard about the 10,000 steps, for example. You don't have to do anything crazy like that, but just even a short walk with deep breathing can help to reduce our cortisol levels, which can bring down the anxiety response as well. The final thing I want to share here is the research around creativity and anxiety, which I thought was super interesting. We may have heard of the idea of the flow, and flow is this idea of deep focus. And when you are so focused, you're actually enjoying your work, or you're enjoying your time spending with someone. For example, you're not worried about the time, you're not worried about how long it's going to take. And you're not worried about it, it's not busyness. You're just absorbed in that task. So I want us to all reflect that when was the last time when writing, cooking, painting, building, doing something felt joyful for you and it didn't feel like work? And I think for me, I'm trying to think of an example. I think when I was painting with my daughter, actually, it was a couple of weeks ago, actually, and I was like, there were dishes in the sink, and the laundry hadn't been done. I had no idea what we were going to have for dinner that day, but my daughter really wanted to paint, so I was like, you know what? Let's just take out the paints, and then we put some nasheeds on, and we just painted. And I totally forgot about the other things. I had emails to check and students to respond to, but I was just enjoying my time painting with her, and we just completely lost track of time. Her cup was full, my cup was full at the end as well, and then of course the housework and emails and meetings are always there to stay. And the reason why flow matters is that it can actually reduce anxiety and overthinking, and it can strengthen our emotional well-being. And I would say this idea of flow, more than perfectionism, can be related to the idea of ihsan within our deen. And we learned from several ahadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah loves that when any of you does a job or an effort, that you do it with excellence. So I would say this idea of flow, and I think there is a very popular self-help, sort of like pop psychology book on this concept of flow as well. And there's a little bit of research done on it too. Okay, so the last thing, inshallah, I'm hoping we can finish in the last 5 minutes. I don't want to go over time, is looking at spirituality and just things that are built into our deen that can help us with anxiety and perfectionism. I'm going to skip this slide. Okay, so one thing that can counteract anxiety is this idea of resilience, and this comes from the positive psychology research world. Resiliency refers to a set of skills or tools or characteristics that can help us to adjust to life's various demands, and it helps us to cope as well. And this word here, adjustment, is really important. It's kind of like uncertainty and tolerance that we talked about earlier. You learn how to become more tolerant of things not going your way, people not listening to you, and you just learn to be more flexible. We see from the literature that resilient people are less likely to become anxious. They're less likely to become helpless. Sorry, the word helpless got cut off with the diagram there. And you're more likely to engage in problem-solving strategies and also take risks. Whereas if you're dealing with perfectionistic tendencies, individuals who are high on perfectionism, they tend to engage less in problem solving because they're more thinking about rumination. They're always in their head, overthinking every single possible outcome, and they're not actually doing the action, and they're not taking risks either. With regards to the Islamic framework on this, I would say that these uh, different levels of thoughts have really helped me to reframe some of my own self doubt or critical thinking. So, from the Islamic psychology lens, will focus on just the first three, so not all of them. We have different types of thoughts. So, we have the fleeting thoughts that you have entertained, but there's no behavior. And then there's self talk, hadithun nafs, but there is no inclination to do that behavior. So, what our scholars have taught us is that the first three levels of thought you are not accountable for, you are not sinful for. So, even if you are struggling with this, just to kind of take a deep breath, take a sigh of relief that inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not holding us accountable for maybe you had a negative thought about yourself or your parent or your spouse or someone else, but it was just a fleeting thought. Even if you have entertained it, and then even if you are talking to yourself about that thought, again, we should work on reducing this, but this is not sinful. The stages of resiliency has also really helped me personally, so I thought I would share this with you as well. We, of course, see from our hadith and Quran literature that we have various stages of patience. So I think we all know sabr, like the common sabr, which is wajib. So this is something that we have to do. This is your minimum baseline. So not to express anything or any displeasure with the decree of Allah. Again, you might have thoughts, but as long as you're not saying any of those thoughts. Then the next level is being content with the decree of Allah, where you are accepting what has happened to you or what is happening to you. The third level is being happy with the decree of Allah. So you're actually like completely reframing your mindset from negative to positive. And the final one, which I think like I've seen very few people in my life, alhamdulillah, they're in my family, in my current family situation. I know individuals who are at this level. I am not, unfortunately, where you are in a challenging situation and you are actually thankful to Allah for being in that situation. So that is like, I would say, the highest form of resiliency, and individuals who have this tend to experience lower levels of anxiety as well. Also knowing that Allah's knowledge and promises are true. So we see this ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 155. I'm not going to play it here because it might have some technical difficulties. So understanding that we can't control the type of test that we're going to be dealt with in this life, or when it will come, or who it will come through, but we can control our reaction and our level of patience. So trying to reframe cognitively our mindsets, but letting go of this idea of control can also help reduce anxiety as well as perfectionistic tendencies. Finally, one of our most important tools within our deen is the concept of dua and the action of making dua as well. So if you are anxious about doing, like, you have maybe a big project at school or a big deadline at work, or maybe you're hosting a big party at your house and you need to get the house cleaned, or there's something happening with your children or with your health, for example, making after the action for accepted outcomes. Because remember, we are not responsible for the outcomes, and I think we get super anxious about how it will all play out. I love this dua. I learned it from my teachers as well. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan amalan mutaqabbala, which is like, it's a super comprehensive dua that, oh Allah, help us to gain knowledge, help us to have a good provision and accept a good outcome at the end. So you're putting that control on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your actions and try to benefit from it. And finally, of course, I know we talked about self-talk, we talked about other talk, we talked about therapeutic talk and going for therapy. But of course, one of the best tools that we have is talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. We don't need a mediator, we don't need an imam, we don't need a therapist. We can just straight talk to our creator. And we know this this very well-known ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that when we ask of him, he is very close, or he is near to us. So I think something like this also can really help to reduce anxiety. It helps us to bring everything back to the present. Okay, so as we end off, inshallah, if you would like to do something like this, you can put in the chat or do it on your own time. Gratitude, the research on gratitude and anxiety is also super interesting, that the more grateful you are, that can also lower your levels of anxiety and also make you more accepting of the world around you, the people around you, and not to be super critical or hypercritical of everything and everyone. So what I want you to do is write one thing that you've learned from today, one thing that you are grateful for, and then one way that you learned today of how you can become more resilient and less anxious from some of the evidence-based practices that we talked about, the self-help practices, or even having a deeper look at your own personality as well as childhood relationships. Okay, so one thing you learned, one thing to give shukr for, and one way to reduce anxiety. Okay, so inshallah, we will end over here. My email is there. That's my personal email. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. Again, I'm not a clinical psychologist or a psychotherapist, so I can't give you therapy, but I can refer you to others if you do require that extra help. And we will end here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. I think I might have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any quick questions. And I'll have a look at the chat box as well. Some books on how to control our emotions. That's a good question. I'm trying to think of. I know I always recommend like gratitude journaling. That's not an actual book. That's more of a self-help practice. Let me think about that and see if I can think of any. If anyone else has any other questions or even comments, something that you learned or found interesting from today. I know there's a lot of information that I put in there. Okay, so I think we're good. I don't see. Okay, why people become really angry when they're anxious? That's a really good question. So yes, we didn't talk about the link as much between anger and anxiety. There is some research showing there are, again, different theoretical models as to why that might be happening. The one that I'm most familiar with is just looking at what anxiety is doing to you. So when you are anxious, you're getting like high blood pressure, your heart is pounding, maybe you're feeling dizzy, sweaty palms. So there's a very like high physical response. The emotional response is that you are worried about the future or you are grieving over the past. So you are not able to stay in the present. And that sort of cognitive dissonance and that tension that exists between our emotions and our physical body can lead to a response that looks like anger, but it's actually not anger. It is actually anxiety. But you're right, it can definitely show up as anger, that people are trying to stay within the present. And then again, anxiety has many times it's comes with depression, it comes with helplessness, and that can make people feel super upset and frustrated and angry. That's a really good question. Okay, look for any other questions here. Okay, so yes, I do see a question around the idea of flow. Okay, so the concept of flow, psychologically, again, this is I do want to be mindful that it's kind of pop psychology, self-help. So the research on it is still we're still looking at the research on this idea of flow, but it's a mental state where you are fully absorbed by an activity and you're so absorbed by it that you are completely enjoying it. You're not trying to multitask. And in the book that talks about flow, I'm forgetting the author's name now. It's essentially when your challenge, what you're doing, matches your skill level. So if you remember that diagram I showed earlier, let me see if I can go back to it, about skill and the gap, yes. So essentially in flow, the gap is reduced. So whatever your expectations are of that challenge and what your skill level is, it's almost matching. So you're able to enjoy the task, and it's not about learning, it's not about catching up. Your expectations and realities are matched up to each other quite well. So that's another definition of flow as well. But yeah, so essentially that's a lot of times this idea is used in time management or even in stress management as well, that try and take just even 20 minutes, 30 minutes of your day and try to build up this practice of flow. So you're not like, I know sometimes my mornings are like I'm unloading the dishwasher and I'm checking emails and making breakfast and trying to run for my train to get to work. So this is not flow. This is just multitasking and you're just in survival mode. But if you get some time, try and develop a ritual where you're sitting down for 10 minutes and you're just completely engrossed in one task. Then increase it to 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, and then an hour. And then just try to build it up in that routine. Can you talk more on feeling negative motivation when the person actually means well? Okay, so what I'm understanding from this question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you are sensing from somebody else um, that they have bad intentions, I guess, or they're like what they're saying is not what they mean, or when the person actually means well. Okay, so I'm trying to think. I don't know if you can give me an example of this, but this is what I'm understanding from this. So if you are feeling negative motivation, again, that could be coming from that hypervigilance, hyper criticism. You will have to do a deeper look at yourself and see why that might be happening. One way is to look at past behavior. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So that person in the past, have they ever guided you wrong? Do they have negative intentions towards you? Have they demonstrated jealousy or any sort of harm towards you or your family? That's one way of looking at it. So looking at past behavior. And then coming to the present, looking at your own emotions and reactions. So getting in touch with your uh, body as well. That do you feel all of a sudden like sort of like, sometimes you have that feeling. It's just a feeling. When someone comes in front of you, you just get like a negative sort of vibe or energy from them. So that you have to check for yourself as well. Is your heart rate getting faster? Is your breathing getting more shallow? And if it is, then you have to check with yourself that, okay, is your body trying to tell you something that you're just not feeling comfortable with the other person? So in that regard, I would say still listen to your body, respect the cues that it's giving you, but also, of course, give the benefit of the doubt. This is from our dean as well, to give people many excuses, right, for their behavior. So just take things as they are on the surface, take them at face value, but just be cautious as well if you really are feeling that the other person may have negative intentions. Okay, the next question is what should be the reaction or behavior of family around a person that is suffering from anxiety? That's a really, really good question as well. I would say if you are able to, and it's difficult, but if you're able to, just to try and get them to come to the present. So instead of talking about, maybe perhaps they're talking about something that you did yesterday and they're blaming you for it, or something that you haven't done for the future, try and just bring them to the present. I'm not saying agree with them, but you can at least validate them. So validation would be something like, I'm trying to think of like an anxious response that I've had with my family. So for example, let's just say, for example, I will tell my kids, you guys haven't cleaned up your toys yet. You never clean up your toys. So you can see the all or never, right? All or none thinking. You never put your stuff away. My kids, alhamdulillah, they do clean up their toys really well. So this is not a real example. Um, so all of a sudden I'm saying, you never do this. And why don't you ever do this? So someone could respond to me instead of saying, what are you talking about, mom? I always put my stuff away. Instead of trying to give a rational response, you just want to validate them. Validation could be something like, I can see why you're feeling frustrated. I can see why you feel that the house is not clean. So just I can see, I can understand, or even just repeating what they said is a great form of validation. It makes them feel heard. So just sometimes people who are feeling anxious just want to be heard. They don't want advice and they don't want therapy in the moment, but just helping them feel heard. So they might say something like, I'm getting so upset. And you can just say, I can see that you're getting so upset, or I hear that you are feeling upset. Just repeat the same words back to them using the keywords. Don't repeat the whole sentence because they'll think you're making fun of them. But that's, I think, validation. Just in the moment, that could be a good response for family members. Okay, so I think those are all of the questions. Alhamdulillah. I don't know if you have any other ones as well. Yeah, someone's mentioning something, a very common example for all of us, right? That perhaps our parents would say, like you say, you get like an A, well, like you get an 85%, and then what happened to the 90%, right? So it's like even if you get like 99, what happened to the last 1%? So yes, it can impact our sense of like self-worth, self-esteem. Your self-worth is tied to your grades or your academic success. But again, we want to be mindful of not blaming our parents for some of the traits that we have nowadays, just understanding it, still being thankful and that they tried the best that they knew about the knowledge that they had, and then working on ourselves to not do this to the next generation. Okay, Jazakallah khair, everybody, for coming on today and for your interaction and all of those amazing questions as well. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa